Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and I have on the line Mr. Daniel Ameduri from FutureMoneyTrends.com. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and we have a lot to cover, so we'll just jump right in. What do you say?
Sounds good.
I've been over at your site and looking at your very impressive bio that you have. And what stands out to me is the second paragraph in your bio, and it says, after warning family and friends in 2007 about the coming market and mortgage collapse, Daniel Ameduri started his own YouTube channel, Vision Victory, which has received 8 million video views. Congratulations on that. That's a big number.
Thanks very much.
On March 18th, 2008, Daniel called for Dow 8000, the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, AIG, and Washington Mutual. During the mortgage crisis, he helped people buy put options on Countrywide Mortgage. These puts saw a gain of 1,400%. That is a big number. That's a great call right there, Daniel. My goodness.
Yeah, no, it was. I wish I had put everything I had in it.
There is a lot going on in our world today, as I know that you are familiar with, because at FutureMoneyTrends.com, you seem to keep your finger on the pulse of a lot of things going on. And you have all your different websites, or the YouTube channels. You've got the Vision Victory and Crush the Street and Victory Independence. Is there any that I'm overlooking?
We do have a Future Money Trends one as well, which is just a YouTube Future Money Trends channel.
Well, and I have to tell you, Daniel, that this conversation would have never happened had I not been with SGT, or with Sean over at SGT Report, and he really introduced me to you and your work. And so, hat tip to Sean.
Oh, well, thanks.
And it's been great, and getting to know people like you is really awesome.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Sean's work, and it's always inspiring. And I always try to encourage people to look at him and people like Peter Schiff, to where, okay, we all acknowledge that we've got some big problems here, some unprecedented things happening in the economy, and that will obviously affect our personal finance and personal situation. But you can always do something to better the lives of others. And of course, the more utility and value you add to other people, you're likely to increase the value and the wealth and return in your own life. Well, here, a guy like Sean had a hobby, and the hobby turned into this great website that now provides news and information. And of course, he makes money from advertisements. And Peter Schiff, here's a guy who was really passionate about telling people about the economy and trying to help people, regardless of whether you think a strategy is correct or not. He's definitely passionate, and he's a real believer in what he's doing. And again, here's the guy who's now created a brokerage business, a precious metal business, and I think he's got a mutual fund now, and
Yep.
some books. I mean, there's nothing wrong with capitalism, and you can thrive even in the scenario and environment we're in right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. And if you look at some of the most wealthiest people in the world, and granted, some of them they didn't earn their wealth. They stole their wealth during some of the worst times in history. But most of the really smart people that weren't committing acts that weren't criminals, who just created their own wealth, did it during some of the worst times in history. Or am I mistaken?
No, I mean, probably the biggest gains have been made during those worst times in history.
Yeah, because if you look back at the Weimar Republic, in that situation, I believe I've read stories where people were buying entire blocks of downtown for an ounce of gold, or something else. Just crazy things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can even look at 2009, 2008, when a lot of assets were distressed. I mean, if you look at silver, was it $890, gold in $700 or $800. And other assets like oil, I think oil, gosh, it went all the way down to $28. I think was the low in 2009. So a lot of opportunity for people to buy distressed assets during times of crisis.
Yes, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. There's not a thing wrong with capitalism, not
Yeah.
one thing. It's how you use it or abuse it is what makes the difference. And I want to ask you something real quick, Daniel. The situation that is in Ukraine has taken a turn for the worse,
Mm-hmm.
and we just found out that there's a significant troop buildup in Jordan and Iraq, and the situation in Syria, it hasn't improved. While it's not driving the headlines, it is still very much in play. And in your estimation, what is the likelihood of World War III? And if you do not see World War III in our future, what would be the alternative for the banksters to escape the current global economic nightmare?
Hmm. Well, that's quite a question there, and of course, it's speculative for all of us. But I first, speaking as somebody who has a 9 month old, a 3 year old, and a 5 year old, I actually find myself, definitely hoping that we don't have World War III, but almost kind of hoping that, look, if the Fed can just, not implode the whole damn thing into a disaster, I'd almost be in favor of just do what you got to do, just don't implode the damn thing, because it's going to be catastrophic when the whole system comes unthreaded, and it kind of already is. It's breaking at the seams here.
Yes.
War, as you know, if anybody's listened to Salente or some of these guys who really looked at the trends and macro picture for the economy, war is certainly an option for an end game, because war is the greatest distraction. And if you want to make the U.S. dollar really strong, you cause global uncertainty in a time when the U.S. dollar is actually, they're devaluing the currency, but of course the dollar is the tallest midget in the room right now. Everybody's devaluing their currency relative to physical asset right now. Gold is not falling against the dollar, and gold is actually starting to rise here a little bit, which gives me I suspect that this could actually be gold crossing and where it's going to start rising, and dollar possibly topped out, which of course maybe this is all laying the groundwork, and the markets are telling us that there is a war on the horizon. And certainly Putin is letting the West know that he is not the guy to be messed with.
Yes.
And they keep messing with him, of
Yeah.
course, though. And in the Middle East, I mean, we've made such a mess of things. It's hard to comment on that, because it's always people always say it's been with us, but if we look at our actions as a government, the U.S. government has been really manipulating the Middle East for some time now, overthrowing democratically elected presidents like the one in Iran, and installing dictators. And there's a reason why these people don't like us.
Yes.
But anyway, back to your question, what alternative do the bankers have besides war? That is the one thing that makes me believe that it's not always an imminent collapse, as I once absolutely believed it was. It could be postponed or delayed, because what I started to think about a few years ago, when the 2009, essentially, I thought the world was it. This was absolutely going to happen. And then they were able to extend it. And then it went into 2011 and 2012 and then 2013. And that's about the time I started to think, okay, well, if they were able to extend this collapse, and now we know that essentially they are only making the situation worse and larger,
Yes.
but what else could they do to extend even this one? I kind of tried to open my mind a little bit to trying to think like a sociopath or somebody who works in the government or the central bank. And there were three things that kind of stood out. You can reform the entitlement system, which is very unlikely. Raising the age of Social Security to kick the can. But then there are some that are more ideal for the central bank and the government, where you could almost reset the system. On the eve of a dollar collapse, you could simply replace the dollar. just like Nixon had a currency crisis and people wanted their gold. Nixon simply came out on the podium and said, no more gold. And of course, he had to deal with a crisis after that, but essentially he replaced the gold backed dollar with a fiat currency. It is possible for them to come out and replace the fiat currency dollar with a gold backed dollar, a natural gas backed dollar, a oil backed dollar, a multiple currency. You don't ever hear about it anymore, but a Canadian Mexican dollar. I mean, the dollar is technically backed by nothing, but it's also technically backed by a military and by
Yes.
a lot of first world cities in the U.S. One eye-opening thing for me when it comes to the end game was Harry Dent gave a great presentation a few years ago, and he showed the median income and average income for all these other countries, these emerging markets. And my goodness, India and China and Philippines and Brazil, all these guys are down at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year.
Right.
There is such a gap to close, and those economies, by the way, are heavily tied to both commodities and Western consumerism. So it's really hard to close that gap. So anyway, just looking at the big picture, there are some things they could do to kind of reset the system. And again, like I said, reforming entitlements, simply issuing out a new currency. I mean, that's the one biggest thing that I think that is most likely to happen, because it's happened already 4 times in this nation's history.
Like an SDR?
Doesn't even have to be an SDR. It could just be a new American dollar. Or some type of can't think of what they called it. It used to happen every 7 years. I think it's but like a jubilee.
Debt jubilee.
Something where there was a debt jubilee in the whole world. I mean, let's be honest.
Yes.
The whole world is awash in debt, including China, the Europeans. So you got the vast majority of the population, and certainly the big percentage of global GDP. Those countries are awash in debt, so it would. And the biggest one that I stress to people is everybody who's in power right now, as evil as they are, the system works for them.
Right.
So we have to remember they're going to defend this to the end. It's not going to be, in my opinion, that we're not going to buy silver and gold, and then Bernanke, Yellen, and Jamie Dimon and George Soros get screwed. They're going to defend the system and break the rules, just like with the GM bondholders.
Yes.
The rules don't apply here. They're going to do whatever it takes to defend their current situation, whether you're the prime minister in another country or you're the leader of China or the Communist Party. These guys are all in it together. They're going to do whatever it takes to defend the status quo.
Because they have the money and they have the control, and they don't want to give it up.
Exactly.
And speaking of prime ministers, what are your thoughts on what's happening in Greece? I mean, are they actually going to be allowed to leave the European Union or get rid of the euro, or is that even in their best interest? My buddy Dave Kranzler over at Investment Research Dynamics, he thinks that it's not in their best interest, and he thinks that what's going on right now is a lot of posturing between the two, and that Greece wants to actually stay in the euro or in the European Union, and I don't. I think that they want to do whatever's best for their people. And what are your thoughts?
Well, initially, getting rid of the drachma and getting the euro was in Greece's interest. And today, they have a lot of debt and they have a lot of obligations, and they probably don't want to do any austerity. But their alternative of having their own currency, if the people of Greece think that it's bad now, imagine what happens when they don't have a currency that is relatively, I guess, I don't want to say strong, but the euro is certainly a better currency than the alternative. And we're not talking about them going from the euro to another relative currency like the dollar in global transactions. We're talking about them going from the euro to a currency that is going to be like a roller coaster.
Yes.
Who is going to want to have drachmas? What value will it have coming from a government that can't pay its bills, with unemployment? For some, it depends depending on what age you are for the youths, into the 30-40% range for young people.
Yes.
So I don't know if I was living in Greece. I mean, of course, I'm a free market guy, so I'd want them to cut the hell out of government anyway. But I personally think that you're far better off with a euro than a drachma, and that's why the people of Greece have benefited from that. Yes, they have become enslaved debtors to this system, which is a sad situation. Um, on the flip side, they have a currency in their country that has purchasing power, and mainly because of the Germans, because the Germans are the biggest economy in Europe, and they're also the most robust economy. They're hard workers. I don't want to call Greece people lazy, but look, if you look at their entitlement programs and you look at their age of retirement and all these silly things with their mandatory vacations and sick time and work hours and breaks. I mean, it's absurd. It's the total opposite of what's going on with the Germans. So I personally think that Greece, if they get out of the euro, it's probably suicide for them. And I honestly don't think that it means it's going to be the end of the euro. People think that it's going to be the end because it's going to be a domino effect, and then they'll lose Italy and the currency will fall apart. It may just be a, a consolidation of the stronger European countries. So I don't think there's much downside for the euro losing Greece, but I think Greece has an enormous downside losing the euro.
You don't think that the credit default swaps would be triggered, or the CDO? I guess I probably one and the same. The collateralized debt obligations.
One thing that we have to keep in mind is that I believe the Greece economy is no bigger than the Dallas Fort Worth area in the U.S. So we're not talking about a large economy, and also with all these derivatives, it's like an insurance company. They really are insurance products, and a lot of people talk about if the derivatives blew up. But remember, there's always somebody on the other side of the trade.
Right.
So of course, yeah. I mean, if every let's put it in simple terms to homeowners insurance, if every house burns down, then yeah, Allstate is going to file bankruptcy. But if 20 houses burn down out of 5,000 houses, Allstate's going to be in business because there's always something going on the other side of the trade. So there's always somebody on the other side of the bet in the derivatives market. So I don't see Greece igniting. Look at it this way: if Lehman Brothers and the U.S. didn't do it in 2008, I don't think this small country that isn't really contributing that much to global GDP is.
Okay. And I'm glad you used the housing analogy, because that's where I want to go next, and the housing market. And personally, I get mixed signals about the housing market. I live in Middle Tennessee, and the housing market couldn't be stronger. Seriously,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a seller's market, and prices go up on a daily basis. But I know that there's, outside of my neighborhood and outside of where I live, things are not all that rosy. And where is the problem in the housing market? And are we going to experience another crash? And once again, I'm just asking for speculation, or maybe uh, in the prices similar to what we saw in the time frame of 2006 to 2009. And how do you see the housing market progressing through the spring and summer at this point?
Housing is my first true love. I've been buying real estate since I was 18. I'm still buying real estate actively right now. However, I do believe housing is in an absolute bubble. Maybe not for the mid South and central states of the U.S., specifically Texas. Although if oil goes any lower and stays lower, that could definitely be a problem for Texas's housing market. But let's take a place like California, which I know well. I was born and raised in California. In California, they're at a point where the millennials, the 18 to 35-year-olds, just can't buy homes.
Right.
And we have to remember that interest rates are as low as they can go. So when people go to get a mortgage right now, they're getting a 4% loan. And in California, the government will provide you with your 20% down payment. It's considered a loan, but you don't have to make any payments on it. And if you live in the house for 10 years, the loan is forgiven.
Oh my
So
God.
the California market is in an extreme bubble where people are paying $3,000 a month to live in 1,000 square foot home, and
Wow.
you're an hour outside of Los Angeles City, and it gets worse in San Diego, and it's Orange County is even higher. So California is in a pretty epic bubble right now because there is just no growth to support it. Now, overall, the housing market has significant problems. The young people are not getting the jobs like the baby boomers did. As you know, the recovery, or the so-called recovery,
Right.
the jobless recovery, there are less people working now than in 2008. There are less people working now than in 2000, even though population has grown significantly. The baby boomers are either not leaving because they're not financially ready to leave. So there's no upward mobility for a millennial who does have a good job, if they have a good job. And the baby boomers, when they do leave, a trend in corporate America is they're getting rid of middle management. So
Yes.
even when a baby boomer who's making great money leaves, they aren't refilling that position. That position just goes away. So there's definitely a structural problem because you've got a lot of baby boomers, which is about 75 to 80 million. They're going to be selling homes. They're going to want to downsize. They're moving. They're migrating to Florida. They're migrating to Texas. They're migrating to Tennessee and Nevada and Arizona. And so there's going to be a boom in those states: Tennessee, Texas, Florida. I mean, you've got a serious population shift. However, you look at like the northeast states in California, they're trying to leave. However, the replacement buyer is not there in the housing market. Prices are as high as they can go. It would appear in certain places like California, with interest rates the way they are and lending standards the way they are. Now they could go back to the stated income and the interest only, but I don't think they're going to do that with the 2008 crisis this recent. However, you never know what the mortgage industry could come up with to stretch out. Maybe they'll come up with a 50-year loan or a 100-year loan. Um, but the housing market to me seems way, way overstretched, and it definitely looks and feels like a bubble. In many, pretty much the coasts definitely look like a bubble, with the exception of Florida. And the fundamentals are horrible for housing. Like I said, it has a lot to do with the baby boomers needing to get out and the millennials not having the money to get in.
Mm.
Now, on the flip side, just real quick, because I know I'm kind of long-winded on that answer. Um, as someone who believes in owning hard assets, I do like real estate though, because I did mention that I think it's a bubble, but I still am buying in certain places. I like real estate as a hard asset because, just like physical precious metals, real estate property is real, and with a tenant, whether you have you're doing storage or a commercial property or residential property, the tenant is paying you a monthly dividend on your hard asset, and your hard asset, a home, the house I'm in right now, and like everybody else, it has not only manpower, but it has in it concrete and copper and silver and lumber. So this is a real commodity that I'm standing in, and it's something that people need and desire. And again, you're probably going to want to focus on areas that have some underlying economics to support them, because in California, where it's an 81% consumer economy as opposed to the US, which is 70% consumer economy, the fundamentals are horrible in California, but the fundamentals are great in a state like Texas, where a good 85% of the net job growth in the last 6 years has come from Texas. I want to say all wage increases in the last 15 years. If it wasn't for North Dakota and Texas, you would not have any wage increases net increases, inflation adjusted, in the last 15 years. If you
Wow.
took out Texas and North Dakota, so fundamentally, buying some hard assets, and again, a place like California, you buy a $500,000 house, it rents for 2,000. In Texas, or Tennessee or Florida, you can buy a $200,000 house or a $100,000 house, and it rents for 1,200. The numbers make sense.
Yep. I guess that's why there's a lot of people coming to Tennessee.
Oh yeah, well, and
It's
it's also you notice the no income tax states are right there on the top of the list for the baby boomers.
yes, there is no state income tax here, and I'm very grateful for that. And I want to wrap this up, Daniel. You've mentioned hard assets a couple of times there, and India is still grabbing as much as possible on silver, and China is acquiring silver and gold with both hands. Silver Eagles, Canadian maple leaves, they're being rationed. Have been since they came back online for the 2015 series. And the gold and silver markets are now confirmed to be rigged. It's by the bullion banks. It's not anything that's no theory, it's proven fact.
Yep.
And with the price of gold and silver, they seem to be hanging around 1,200 for gold and around $17 for silver. And what is going to break the back of these bullion banks who are firmly in control of these rigged markets? Or do you see a major world power backing their currency with gold and or silver?
It appears that ultimately China is going to back their currency, but it might not happen for 20 more years. However, I am very optimistic about gold and silver right now. If you look, first of all, SGT Report had a great article, and he mentioned it in an interview I did with him a few days ago, that gold is rallying it in all the other currencies except for the US dollar.
Yep.
Now, what's interesting is if you look at sentiment for gold, it is hated right now. The gold stocks are actually the most hated ever, literally, from the time they've kept this data. So the dollar is loved, gold is hated. We've all seen this story before. Everybody loved real estate in 2006. Everybody hated stocks in 2009. And you see these reversals. And everybody was really worried about the dollar in 2010, as I was. S&P downgraded, gold rallied big, and then we saw the reversal. Well, it looks like the reversal could be happening right now because we're actually seeing gold from November. It's stayed around the 1,200 area, even though the dollar's rallied. Now, if you look at a 40-year chart of gold and the dollar, when the dollar rallies, gold goes down. When gold rallies, the dollar goes down. However, for the last 4 or 5 months here, we've been in a situation where gold is either going up with the dollar or not going down when the dollar goes up. So what I actually suspect, and I'm writing an article about it today, what I suspect is happening is we're not seeing a new trend that's breaking the old trend of the last 40 years. What we very well may be witnessing is the dollar and gold crossing each other and at a major pivot point. So it's not that the gold is not going down and the dollar is rising. It's about that gold is likely bottomed here at the 1,200 area because we first hit around 1,200 in summer 2013. I mean, we've gone to 1140, but we've really been lingering around this area. And the dollar, though, man, that thing has rallied 19% since July relative to other currencies. And so we might be at a situation where, especially if you look at a chart of the dollar looks like it's topped. It's toppy. The Dow Jones looks like it's topped. And gold seriously looks like it's bottomed. If anybody looks at the TSX Venture Exchange, my goodness, I've never seen a sexier chart in my life. They should put that thing on the front cover of Sports Illustrated. This thing is at an absolute worst low. If you look at a chart of the TSX Venture, which is home to the gold stocks, of 40 years, this is it. This is where it bottoms. And so I think looking at a chart of where the dollar is loved and the dollar is rallying big, and then gold is hated, and gold is not going down anymore, though, I think it does appear that 2015 may be the year where the dollar tops and gold bottoms. And I don't know how many years that'll reverse and what implications that will have on the bankers and the global economy. Because we all know that, I mean, right now what I'm talking about is maybe a change in the trade. Is this the dollars? Is this the final nail in the coffin of for the dollar? Well, honestly, the dollar doesn't deserve to be the reserve currency, and it's a mismanaged currency. It's a botched currency. However, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, all the rest of them are too, and
Yes.
it's the dollar is the worst. The dollar is a horrible currency until you put it against the other ones. I mean, the U.S. again, it is backed by a military. It is backed by a first world nation. Europe is a basket case. Japan is in a depression. China just isn't there. A lot of people want to go, why doesn't China or Russia just take over and become the reserve currency or back the currency with gold? It's just that they're not there. China is their global transactions are about 2% in their currency. Now they're increasing that, but it's a long road ahead. And we're already, look how far we are from 2008, yet it feels so fresh. Time will fly. So I mean, when you're a country, or if you're Putin, who doesn't care about the 4-year election cycle and is looking at Russia in the next 50 years, these guys are making all the moves to get out of the dollar.
Yes.
But they're not like us, where we've got retirements, we've got college, tuition, we've got birthdays, we've got our life, and we're looking at it. We want this to get going, like get it over with, so I can sell my gold and buy some houses or something. These guys are looking at it from a really, really big picture, and they're thinking in sometimes 10, 20, 30-year increments. So definitely, it looks like these other countries are going to make their way towards gold and towards an alternative to the U.S. dollar.
Well, that's been in the works for some time. I mean, China has 26 now direct currency swaps,
Mm-hmm.
including France and Australia, and a little bit with the UK. I mean, these aren't small economies, and these are not small players. And then you've got on the other side of what China is working on, which is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which as that piece of what they're working on continues to grow, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization will encompass roughly 70% of the global natural resources. It will have about 50% of the global human population under its umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a force to be reckoned with, and I think that what you were saying, Daniel, as far as their slow motion, and looking at the big picture in 10, 20, and 30-year increments, China is well known for doing that, and it sounds like Russia either has been or is beginning to use that same type of playbook. And if you've got time, I'd really like to ask you just one more question.
Yeah.
Do you see, or do you think that the relationship between China and Russia is going to grow stronger? And if so, what would that mean for the Western world?
I think it is going to grow stronger, and I think it is the absolute alternative to the Western dominated world when China and Russia cooperate with each other. Europe and the U.S. obviously are the big engines. However, China is also a big engine,
It's
and
huge.
and when it connects with Russia, and I'm sure ultimately India will have a major role in there, because India is a booming economy as well.
Yep.
You look at what's going on, and they will form a complete alternative to Western rule, essentially. I mean, if you look at all the rules, whether it's the banking rules or the IMF or the UN, I mean, it's all run by the West, mainly the U.S. And people, you mentioned a good thing about 50% of the population. Most people don't know this, but the U.S., yes, it's a very dominant player in the world, but it only represents 4.5% of the world population. So we're a very small group of people relative to the other 95%. So I don't. I mean, when I look at Russia and China, China is loaning all the emerging markets money,
Yep.
and of course, we all know the borrower is slave to the lender. And uh, Russia is buying up all the commodities. It's amazing, people, don't ever factor this in, but Russia is actually responsible for a lot of the power that goes on in the U.S. as far as our electricity. About, I want to say about 15% of our electricity comes from uranium, and we import about 95% of our uranium, much of it from Russia.
And that, aren't they
And
the largest uranium producer in the world?
I don't know if they are or Kazakhstan, but I know they're a major player. They actually, here's the crazy thing: they produce more uranium in the U.S. than the U.S. does. Seems like a catch-22, but they're actually producing more uranium here in the States and taking it back to Russia than U.S. producers in the U.S. And it's the same thing with platinum and palladium. These are metals. If we want to keep having our clean air and not have the smog of the 70s and 80s, we need platinum and palladium, and those are essentially produced by um, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Russia.
Yep.
So Russia is my friend Marin Katusa. He wrote a great book. I recommend you interview him about the Putinization of resources, and it's all happening right underneath our nose. It's interesting. The U.S. is using its military to influence the world, and China and Russia are being very smart about this. China is using its money and infrastructure to help to influence the world, and Russia is using commodities.
All
So
business. It's
it's all
all
business.
business.
It's all commerce, and it's actually
Yep.
the China and Russia are taking the advice of the founding fathers: alliances with none, commerce with all. So,
Exactly.
um, you know, China and Russia combining and merging out. Now, Russia's only 100 million people population wise. However, it is a big player on the world stage, and it's a powerful. It's a powerful nation militarily as well. But combining, and here's the big thing: is they're no friend of the U.S.
No.
So it's there, and you know what? It's gone beyond just not being friends. I think people are just kind of, especially the Russians and the Chinese, they're sick of taking the orders from the Americans.
Well, they're
So
sick of
this
being pushed
this
around for no reason.
yeah. So
It's
I don't know how long
unwarranted.
this is going to play out, but certainly Russia and China are coming together, and they are becoming. Um, they're definitely on the same page when it comes to being anti-dollar.
Well, and they are two of the letters that make up the word BRICS.
Hmm.
And I can't remember if Russia is going to be part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or not, but I know that, which is part of the reason that I ask you that question, because I mean the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is, to be perfectly honest, it kind of scares me a little bit because of the power that these people are, that they're, the concentration of power that is going to result from this, or that is resulting, I should say, from this, the development of this organization. I mean, it is staggering. I mean, 70% of the world's resources, natural resources. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? And 50% of the global population. We may need to spend a minute looking at that, or at least recognizing it. And there's not a peep about it anywhere in the mainstream media. Not a word. Nothing.
Yeah.
So, but Daniel, it has been a real pleasure speaking with you. And just tell people about what you've got going on over at futuremoneytrends.com.
Well, we've got some great documentaries, micro documentaries rolling out. We've got the national debt crisis rolling out in a few days, and we just actually released a video called "Socialist Exceptionalism." And though it's not our most viewed video, certainly I love it. I think it's a high quality video. So if you go to futuremoneytrends.com, you can check out our videos, as well as we have crushthestreet.com. We have a college documentary that was just released that seems to be picking up some steam, where people are really enjoying it. And our letter, both Crush the Street and Future Money Trends, We're really trying to fill that hole of personal finance for the new economy. We're you've got Dave Ramsey at one extreme, and then you've got another extreme where you're essentially saving in dried food, and we want to kind of be the one in the middle where, hey, look, let's all be prudent about the situation we're in, because we're in a real crisis. The world is in a real crisis, and things could change dramatically. But we also want to do everything we can to live an amazing life right now, and give our children and our wives and our spouses and our families the life they deserve. And we don't want to live in fear. We don't want to allow the bankers and the oligarchs in power and the sociopaths to determine our happiness. We want to choose our own destiny and choose our own happiness.
Absolutely. Well said, my friend. Well, I
Thank you.
highly encourage everyone to check out Daniel's work at futuremoneytrends.com, and as well as all of his YouTube channels, which are Vision Victory, Victory Independence, Crush the Street, and Future Money Trends. So, and you can you can catch a lot of his work over at thedailycoin.org, because I post just about all of it that I can find anyway.
Thank you.
Daniel, it's been a real pleasure, and I won't take up any more of your time. And like I said, I really hope that we can do this again in the future, and I look forward to speaking with you.
Hey, pleasure talking to you, and please let me know. Send me a link of the interview, and I'd love to send it to our members.
I will do it.
Thanks very much, Roy. You have a good one.
Thank you.